I'm Andy Wells. I work at Stoke Newington Town Hall. I'm in the Civil Protection Service and I manage it. And our sort of dim and distant ancestor is Civil Defence, which was originally called Air Raid Precautions. Stoke Newington Town Hall. Right, I'm going to use a clicker now. Good, yep. We're still based in Stoke Newington Town Hall. It was the original Civil Defence Centre for the Council in 1938 through to 1945. Civil Defence was then stood down but brought back to life in 1947 and then stood down again in 1968. We're still there, we still prepare for emergencies, we still support the emergency services, we support those affected by incidents, we provide mutual aid to other councils, for instance Kensington and Chelsea during Grenfell. We continue to provide normal council service with our business continuity work. We aid recovery from the incident and we maintain the council's incident plans. However, I've got to emphasise I'm not here to represent the council tonight, which is what my line manager told me to say. You may well be familiar with Stoke Newington Town Hall. You may even have noticed the unusual paint pattern. If you look in the top left-hand corner, you can see the original camouflage paint with which it was painted completely all over, and then a net was thrown over the top in 1939 to prevent it being bombed by the Nazis. It obviously worked, it's still there, which is good news. And you can see the paint pattern in its best preserved form in this top left-hand window with the green, the brown and the black colours. This is what the people looked like who worked there in 1939. This is the typical uniform. And you can see the Civil Defence insignia on their chest pocket, which means that that was post-1940 because it changed its name from Air Raid Precautions in 1940. You can see people weren't as photogenic in those days. I don't think they were quite as camera conscious as we are perhaps these days. All apart from this gentleman here on about there who's got a very cinematic pose there, I think. This is actually one of the people who worked there. This is Simon Pincus, who was married to his wife Celia in the Wellington Road Synagogue in Stoke Newington, which is now underneath the Somerford Grove estate. And he was part of the civil defence infrastructure in World War II. One of the other people who had much to do with this was Councillor John Stanton. And this is his pass written out in 1944, giving him access to all civil defence premises, presumably because he had to go and see what was going on. And when he was visiting, he had this rather svelte, nice, it looks actually like a welcome mat, doesn't it? But it's actually an armband, which presumably went round a very nice coat, I'm sure. The average person who worked for Civil Defence looked more like this. And this is a decontamination squad. These guys are a lot more photogenic though. They're looking at something high up on there. And they were wearing oilskins, Wellington boots, because their job was to go and decontaminate the roads in the case of a gas attack. In 1952, after World War II, they decided they needed a nuclear bunker. And this is what's currently underground at Stoke Newington Town Hall. It's a 10-room bunker. One of the rooms, we don't know what it was. It's the room with no name. The rest we've worked out what they are. The controller information room, counter room, the voice procedure room, which is where the wireless and telephone work was done. Then there was a power and ventilation room. We called it the bunk bedroom. Opposite, then there was the kitchen, toilets, and then the staircase upwards. And we've actually been down and videoed it for you, because we can't take you down there because it's a little bit dangerous. Cave spiders is one of the nasty things down there, which we didn't tell my friend who went down with me. But there you go, this is the outside of the bunker. We'll come back to these in a minute, but these are the ventilation chutes that fed air into and out of the bunker. This is the escape hatch, which if you're unlucky enough to be trapped in there by falling debris, you could climb out of, and there were two of those. And this is the services duct, where all the ventilation for the kitchen area went into. We then move over to the blockhouse. Now the external door wasn't this panel door you see here, it was actually a trellis grille. And you can see it's folded to the right here. And that was the only external door. So there was no attempt at blast reduction at the top or any gas filtration or anything like that. The yellow cabling in there is temporary lighting that's been put in. You can see the extent of the surface blockhouse as it goes down there. This is all temporary wiring which was put in a long time ago and has since failed. And currently due to the damping, in fact when I turned it on it exploded with a huge bang. So we've got some temporary lights. And I think this is the first time anybody's been down here probably for the last 10 years. So I had an intrepid assistant in the form of David Blair-Reed and my colleague Chris here, who came and helped me go down there. And this is all done basically with a torch, so it's a bit Blair Witch Project-esque. You can see the original ventilation pipe there for the sewage system and the original handrails. The stairs then go for a 90-degree turn and lead down to a spine corridor which runs from east to west. You can see there the original wooden door frame, which was the only protection, surprisingly, and it even had a ventilation grille on top, so free air movement. So I don't think they quite cottoned on to fallout. As we turn left here, we walk along towards, in the background you can see the phonogram room, which is telegrams. And just to the left is the unknown room. Now you see that there's brick pillars in there. These were added in the 90s to support a building that was erected on top. So they weren't part of the original installation, obviously. You can see some of Hackney Council's finest IT, which has been put into temporary storage down here for when we next need it. This was the ventilation system. The whole concept was that air was stuffed into the bunker as fast as they could. And it's what they call a positive pressure model, so that the air is filtered, stuffed in, and then it pushes out and keeps all the nasties out, in theory. This is the phonogram room. And in here you can see, again, brick pillars holding the building up on top. But you can see the original Cold War phonograms or telegrams. I thought they used to be called teleprinters, but all I can find written down about them calls them phonograms. And you'll see them in a second. So with a lovely archaic keyboard, an Aussie Ardelis sticker on it. Underneath is the power supply. And you can see there's a second one behind it. And behind here is also the original 1952 post office power supply that would have fed the equipment. So apparently it's a telegraph system. I couldn't find much on the internet about these. And let's face it, they're not that interesting really. But anyway, the GPO badge is rather nice. And you can see that the crown there has got the rounded top, which means it's a Queen's crown. So it's post 1953. And of course the bunker was built in 1953. This is a good old-fashioned 5-amp round pin plug. And the little switches and things, and then on top is a light that would have flashed apparently when a message was coming in case you couldn't hear the tape clattering away. I've got no plans to resurrect them. I don't think they'll work. And this again was one of the other power supplies we found dating from 1953. If you're an electrical engineer, you're going to love this. The rest of you are going to be bored silly, I'm afraid. This is the controller and information room. And we found what looks like a temporary notice, because the rest of it looks quite well planned, but this looks a bit ad hoc, doesn't it? I don't know what the latest bit below it says. And over in the corner you can see the escape riser number 2, which you'll see in a second, which was the second emergency escape from the building if you needed it. Hopefully you wouldn't want to need it. I did look up there and there's more spiders up there than I've ever seen, and they're all cave spiders, which are quite poisonous apparently. So it would have to be an emergency for me to want to get up there, I've got to say. And there were 2 of these, one in the east, one in the west. as we move further around the controller and information room, you can see some of the 1970s telecommunications equipment which was installed. And again, for the electrical engineers, you'll like this. Some of this was from America, from Cuba, New York, which I never even knew existed. I have no idea what this stuff did, but it looks interesting, doesn't it? And it's from the Acme Electrical Corporation. So the Roadrunner must have delivered this. And you can see that it was modified in 1978 for 220 volt operation, which presumably is when it came over from the States. These are the message passing hatches, which do exactly what they say on the tin. Everything was written on pieces of paper and passed through between the different elements of the control and command centre. And that room behind it is what's known as the counter room. I've no idea what they counted in there. This is one of the best preserved nuclear bunkers in London, unfortunately. I've no idea what plans the council have got for it. You can see the original cast iron switchgear here, and that was one of the original heaters. The whole bunker was heated by electrical heating. Again, you've got more brick pillars supporting the building on top, and various pieces of stuff that nobody wants anymore. This concrete beam was cast to support the building on top, so it's not part of the original fitting. And there you can see the temporary lighting that I managed to blow up trying to get down there. There's another message passing hatch, and this leads to the voice procedure room. But you can't get through that door because it's full of rubbish. So we'll go back into the corridor, avoiding the cave spiders, go down the corridor and into the exotic delights of the ladies' toilets, which there's no flowing water anymore. There's plenty of old electrical switchgear, mainly made out of Bakelite. And I think that's made by a firm called Wilex, which is still going. There's a horrible sight in the next toilet, I'm afraid, and anybody here over the age of 50 will recognise that. And the dreaded implications of that small black box. Not for the faint-hearted. Anybody under the age of 50, see me afterwards and I'll explain what it's for. This was a bit of an in-joke for us because Burlington was the code name for the secret nuclear bunker in the West Country, and it was also on our toilets. Who knew? But if you Google Burlington, you'll find reference to the huge central government bunker in Corsham, out by the West Country. Delightful. Unusually, it's got proper toilets. Now, every other bunker of this era I've seen originally had chemical toilets, but because the sewers at Stoke Newington are so spectacularly deep, they're a good 5 metres below ground level, they were able to have proper flushing toilets. So Stoke Newington led the way in bunker toilets. These are the gents' toilets, obviously. Again, all the same plumbing, all the same dreaded toilet roll holders or toilet paper holders. And again, the secret Burlington cisterns. I never thought I'd find myself describing a toilet in front of 175 people. It's almost as good as coal hole covers, isn't it? As you move round the bunker, we're now in the voice procedure room. You can see again the original electric heaters, the message passing hatches from the counter room, and over here you'll find the acoustic hoods. Now, each person in the voice procedure room had an acoustic hood, presumably to prevent cross talk. This is the distribution for the telephone system, and the amount of telephones down there tell you what it was all about, basically. It was a communication centre. There's some probably 20 megabit hard drives there if anybody wants them. No, the asbestos has all been stripped out, luckily. I reassured myself. No, it has genuinely been taken out. Over each of these acoustic hoods was a piece of paper, many of which have fallen to bits, I'm afraid. We also found some papers here from the 1968 exercise, I think it was called Contest 42, We're still doing communication test exercises every month now. So there is some continuity in life. And you can see the original team here. And if you look, you'll see in a second on the bottom, I've frozen it. Hopefully, you can see the sort of the playlist of who was playing in this exercise. At the bottom is Mrs. J.W. Elliott. And we actually found records of her working there in 1940, and she was still working in 1968. But apparently they had let her have a tea break. This is a letter from the Home Office moaning about how they haven't done enough exercises. But this is 1968, so it was the year it was disbanded. So I think things were gradually petering out, unfortunately. This is a dispersal travel pass we found down there. And you'll notice that it mentions the priority classes. These were the priority classes. School children, pregnant mothers, blind people. Not what you'd expect. You'd expect it to be councillors, lords of the manor, etc. Everybody I ever asked that says that. Here's one of the few remaining paper signs over the acoustic hoods telling us what each one did. There's one that says wireless and one that says telephonist or says phonist. We've invented the telly part of it. This box I've actually brought along tonight with me because we've rescued that and made it into the battery box for the nuclear siren. So if you want to come and press the button afterwards, but wait till everybody's gone. This is the original telephone distribution system in the voice procedure room. And you'll see that there are signs up there saying police. There's one saying Old Town Hall and one saying New Town Hall. So presumably at some point there was a link through to the Old Town Hall, which I understand was in Town Hall Approach. Yeah, Milton Grove, yeah. I don't know what PW means, but you can see the original extensions written down there. And it had got quite a high level. This is the sign outside the plant room. So in the event of fire, use the special gloves provided. We haven't found those. I wish I'd had them when I put my finger in the siren, to be honest. It might have stopped the top of my finger being chopped off. This is what we think was the kitchen. And in here is a small hole that goes through into a services duct on the left, and then the original water heater. You can see the butler sink lying on the floor, it's been just thrown there, and some of the old electrical distribution equipment. Again, Wilex. And here you can see the ventilation system that fed the positive pressure through to each room. This is an interesting room, if you're an engineer. This is the generator and ventilation plant room. And you can see here the equipment used to change over between generator and main supply. And the fuse gear. Then you've got the lighting, heating and power circuits up there. That's made by a firm called Bill, who I think were fairly recent actually. On the bottom you'll see the old incoming mains electrical cable, which has been severed by an angle grinder, and the asphalt's slowly been leaking out over the last 50 years. And that was the incoming mains cable that fed the whole bunker. And these, yeah, that's where the cable came in. And those instruments to the left are ammeters, which would have been used to measure the electrical current flowing from the generator into the bunker. Again, if you're an electrical engineer, this is brilliant. But this is the Lister generator. You can see the maker's plate on there. Lister and Sons, who I think were from up north. There's the hand crank handle where some poor soul would have tried to start it by hand with all the lights out, probably working by a small handheld torch. And here you can see the ventilation equipment for the radiator. So the air was pulled in from the right, passed through the fan, through the radiator, and you can see the fan faceplate here, made by Woods of Colchester. Now here you can, if you go back to where we started, you'll see that there's 3 domes there. That one there is where the air was pulled in that was then passed through the radiator to cool the generator. The hot air was then exhausted through that one and out to atmosphere. And on the right is a much taller stack where fresh air was pulled in for the ventilation, for the positive pressure ventilation system. And you can see on here, I don't know if you can see, but just in the bottom here is the date, and it's 1953, which was consistent with the year the bunker was built. Over here we've got the ventilation fans, which pulled the fresh air in, pulled it through filters. Interestingly, in Hackney Town Hall there is a World War II bunker, and another one in Rossingdale Street in Clapton where they've got bicycle powered standby sets. So you could sit there, if all the power had failed, you could sit there and pedal away to bring fresh air in. So, or lose weight, or both. This is the control equipment for the ventilation equipment. Again, it's made by British Clockner Limited, and they were going until quite recently. Probably being bought out by the Chinese or the French now. And over in the corner, you'll see bunk beds. Now, whether they expected somebody to sleep in there, I don't know. You'll also notice that the bunk beds are numbered, so 284, 276, and 260 down on the bottom. Now, if you're wondering where the other 259 bunk beds are, I'll show you that in a minute. I don't know if they were just stored or if they expected people to sleep there, but who knows. This is the incoming GPO telephone cable with all the pairs there. And for the time, this was probably as many telephones as the whole town hall had in 1950. And again, you can see the main distribution centre for the telephones, and again, you can see the extensions they went through to. Again, PW Police, external to Town Hall. You can see I can't focus the camera, can't you? One to the fire commander. This is where the fuel was stored. I can't believe how little fuel they had. They were either very pessimistic to their life expectancy, or it drunk a lot less fuel than we do these days. And when I get the lighting sorted out, again, you can see the generator there and the door that leads out to the spine corridor. If you then go through the spine corridor, we come into what I called the bunk bedroom, because it's got the other bunk beds in it. There's only 3. The reason the numbers are so high is they were redeployed from the deep level shelters, which became the Northern Line. And there were originally thousands of bunk beds down there for shelterers from the World War II Blitz. This is the electrical circuits that led through to the main control, which was in Kelvedon Hatch near Brentwood, and that was where the regional government seat was. And here's escape riser number 1 that leads up to the surface again complete with a contingent of cave spider webs. So I didn't stick my head up that one, I chickened out. And again, you can see the numbering system on the bunk beds, 292. The other thing they redeployed from World War II was all the stretchers, which were all put up on council estates as fences. So if you see a fence which is about 3 foot wide, 3 foot high I should say, with 6 foot long with 2 bends in the pole, that's a World War II stretcher, and they were all redeployed into fencing. Anyway, over to our mayor.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, sure, yeah.